Let's start
by
there.
what you're doing.
What things make the brain worse? What are the common things that most of us do without thinking that make the brain worse?
When my daughter Chloe was in second grade, I went to her classroom and I wrote 20 things on the board. And I went, separate them for me. Good for your brain, bad for your brain. 7-year-olds. They got 19 out of 20 right. So most people know. The only thing they got wrong was orange juice. They put it in the healthy category when, in fact, when is it rational to unwrap fruit sugar from its fiber source? Because it turns toxic in your body. So I'm not a fan of fruit juice. I'm a fan of fruit, not fruit juice. But so the bad category, hitting a soccer ball with your head. No, don't do that.
What's bad about sugar for the brain?
It's pro-inflammatory.
What does that
It
mean?
makes you diabetic.
But I mean, as it relates to the brain, why is like orange juice or the ice cream bad for my brain?
Because it's ultimately going to give you high blood sugar levels, which erode your blood vessels, and you're going to have lower blood flow to your brain. That's a bad thing. I mean, there's so many things about it. So it's addictive. It's pro-inflammatory. It makes it more likely you're going to have diabetes and obesity. So 72% of Americans are overweight. 42% are obese. I've published 3 studies on 35,000 people. As your weight goes up, the actual physical size and function of your brain goes down. That should scare the fat off anyone. I used to be chubby, but when I figured out that connection, I'm like, oh no. It was that gave me the motivation to drop about 25 pounds. And so sugar is the gateway drug to diabetes and obesity. And so, not to mention inflammation, which is the cause of depression and dementia. So
I've got sugar, I've got a head injury. I'm going to avoid both of these things. What else should I avoid?
and then you have low blood flow in those 2 very important areas. And so how can we increase blood flow? So you want to avoid things that cause low blood flow: caffeine, nicotine.
Caffeine?
Caffeine constricts blood flow to the brain.
What does that do to my brain?
Constricts blood flow. So you're going to get less blood flow. And remember, I showed you that progression with age. No, you don't want that. You want to do things that increase blood flow to your brain. So exercise. Ginkgo. This is one of the supplements I'm going to give you. Eat foods like beets, oregano, rosemary, cinnamon. They increase blood flow. And
do you think there's correlation or a link between caffeine consumption and a shrinking brain?
yes,
And a shrinking brain, is that associated with things like dementia?
aging brain. I don't think there's a connection. I haven't read any research that says there's a connection between caffeine and dementia. There's a connection with sleep problems, and there's a connection with sleep problems and dementia. I think if you have like 100 milligrams a day of caffeine, it's probably fine. But one venti Starbucks coffee has got 330 milligrams of caffeine.
Jesus.
And people just aren't thinking about the level of caffeine they're having in our society.
What are the other very obvious things that are not good for my brain? Because I really want to make sure that I avoid those things. So I've got sugar,
So,
head
and
injury.
erectile dysfunction. I mean, B is for blood flow, right? While we're on blood flow, 40% of 40-year-olds have erectile dysfunction. 70% of 70-year-olds have erectile dysfunction. What that means, if you have blood flow problems anywhere, it means they're everywhere. And so, no. And it means either you're too sedentary, you're overweight, you're smoking or having too much caffeine or using marijuana, because marijuana lowers blood flow to the brain. And so just in that one of the 11, it's exercise, ginkgo. And for you, not for everybody, but for you, hyperbaric oxygen. Those three things will make a big difference in blood flow.
Ginkgo.
Ginkgo.
What is that?
It's a supplement.
What does it do?
Increases blood flow.
To the brain?
The prettiest brains I've ever seen take ginkgo. There's actually a SPEC study. They gave people 120 milligrams of ginkgo twice a day. Significant improvement in blood flow to the brain. And so in one of the supplements I'm going to give you, we have ginkgo. I've taken it every day for the last 20 years, at least. And then, this is where the U.S. government got an F for the pandemic. Loneliness accelerates dementia and brain problems. And so when they isolated us, the whole significant increase in brain problems. So get connected to other people. The I in Bright Minds is inflammation. So what increases inflammation? Low omega-3 fatty acid levels. And we are deficient. 93% of the population is deficient in omega-3 fatty acids. 93%. So all of us should be either eating more fish or taking an omega-3 supplement like fish oil. Gum disease. Like, who knew? Like, I wasn't really that good at taking care of my gums until I started reading the studies. You have gum disease, you have inflammation, you're more likely to get depressed and have dementia. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm a flossing fool. H is head trauma. We talked about that. I did the big NFL study when the NFL was struggling with the truth on traumatic brain injury in football. And 80% of our players got better. T is toxins, drugs, alcohol, but other things like mercury and...
What are the unobvious toxins? Because
anesthesia.
Anesthesia. I was looking at my bathroom items, and I have like mouthwash and toothpaste and deodorants and aftershaves, and I was wondering to myself whether those were toxic to some degree.
So there's an app. There's a couple of them, but the one I like is called Think Dirty, where you can scan those products, and it'll tell you on a scale of 0 to 10 how bad they are for you. So 0 is you live a long time, and 10 is you die early. And so when I figured this out, and I was scanning everything, it cost me hundreds of dollars to replace things. And my wife, more than that, with all the makeup and stuff. But I shaved for 50 years with Barbasol. And it's a 9, which is die early. And now I shave with something called Kiss My Face, and it's a 2. It's like, we teach people, read the labels on food stuff. Should read the labels on anything that goes on your body or on your child's body. And we have this epidemic, and we'll get to it, of low testosterone in males because of the toxins we put on their bodies when they're young.
What is the M in Bright?
So the M is mental health. It's the quality of your thoughts, the level of your stress, and the level of trauma you carry in your body, and whether or not you have any of the psychiatric stuff. Like depression, for example, doubles the risk of Alzheimer's disease in women and quadruples it in men. And so the M is what's going on in your mind. And so I teach people to kill the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal their happiness. Understand and process their traumas and treat whatever psychiatric issues may be present. like in your case, the ADD. And I think we start with a supplement, or even consider medication. Talk about the natural ways to do it, the medicine ways to do it. And for me, I'm not opposed to medicine. I'm actually really good at it. But it's never the first and the only thing I think about.
I've really never taken medication in my life. Even like if I get a headache, I don't take medication. I'm not the type of person. I probably haven't taken a pill in really in years. The only time I've taken medication is if I have a severe infection of sorts. So there was this one time where my foot was going green and I'd stood on some glass, whatever, and it was really getting out of control. I'm talking a 2-inch purple thing growing on my foot. And I thought, okay, instead of getting my leg cut off, I'll take this medication the doctor's given me. Otherwise, I just do not take it. So I would rather go through severe pain than take medication because I believe that my body can fix things. So when I think about taking ADD medication or ADHD medication, I don't really know the difference. I go, well, if I'm messy or if my handwriting's bad or whatever it might be, then that's just who I am. And that's okay. I can get better at it. I can be more organized. But why do I want to take medication?
Well, I'm not gonna be the one to sell you on medication. But what I would say is, so a lot of times people ask me the side effects of medication. Mm-hmm. And for stimulants, for ADD, it could be it decreases your appetite or can negatively affect your sleep. But you always have to ask the second question, which is, what are the side effects of not taking the medicine? What's the impact on your life, on your business, on your money, on your relationships, on your health? Because living with untreated ADD, for many people, and maybe not you, but for many people, it goes with chronic stress because of the negative things that tend to go along with it.
The dysfunction.
And for you, you're clearly not broken. But are you optimized? Do you have full access to your own brain? And I would argue no. And we can do better. But we can do it in steps. And ultimately, I see my job is giving people options and then telling them the pros and cons of each option and then letting them choose, right? I mean, that's what good doctors should do. It's called informed consent. And, I can just tell you my experience. I told you the story with my daughter, and I've seen that play out thousands of times, that people just become more optimized. And it's not necessarily the medicine, but that medicine, when it's for the right brain, right, the wrong brain, it makes people worse. And if you read my book, Healing ADD, I talk about the ring of fire ADD. So ADD and ADHD are different terms for the same thing. 1980, the American Psychiatric Association's DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, I hate that, but it's what we have, was attention deficit disorder, ADD, with or without hyperactivity. 1987, God knows for what reason, they changed the name to ADHD. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, basically throwing out half the people who have it, because half the people who have ADD or ADHD are never hyperactive, and they don't get diagnosed because they don't bring enough negative attention to themselves for parents to go, you have a problem and you're giving me a problem. So anyway, different names for the same thing. And if you can manage it by having extra help for the things you're not good at, with exercise, with all of the good habits you have, well, That's awesome. If you want to be 10% more focused, like I treat this writer, and she only takes medicine when she has to get stuff done. But she never takes it when she writes because she has 16 plot lines going on at once in her books. And she goes, no, I think it decreases my creativity a little bit.
Interesting. Because the fact that we're medicating a brain like mine, I go, is that for professional optimization? Because if you just go back, like, I don't know, a couple hundred years, if you go back even further to a time when we could, like, read or write, there wasn't computers and all of these things, you would have had no idea. That, you know, if you go back far, you wouldn't have been able to tell an ADHD, well, what I'm trying to say.
But you'd be able to tell their life. I mean, I have a patient from Ethiopia, and I'm like, so tell me the impact in your culture. And he said, the people with severe ADHD get excluded because they can't be relied on. And the isolation causes great shame and pain. And they have no idea it's a brain thing.
Where does it come from, ADHD or ADD?
Well, it's genetic.
Okay.
It's clearly genetic. I mean, if I don't see it in someone's family, I think head trauma. And with you, I think that's possible because of soccer, except you see it in your family.
Is it a defect or is it a difference?
It's a difference.
If I chose to take a drug, was it like you called it Ritalin? That you called one of the...
So Ritalin would be one of the options.
Whatever drug it was, what exactly would it do under brain scanning to my brain? So if I scanned my brain and took the drug, what would you see in my brain?
Well, I can tell you. It would activate your cerebellum.
Okay, the bit that was a bit sleepy.
It was a bit sleepy, and it would activate your prefrontal cortex. And it would give your brain better energy. So my first SPECT scan, 1991, a woman, she tried to kill herself the night before. I went to the lecture on brain SPECT imaging, and then I walked out of the lecture, and she was my new patient. Her name was Sandy. She tried to kill herself the night before. And as I'm getting to know her, I'm thinking she has ADD. She has an 8-year-old son who has ADD. Talked about the genetic connection. She had an IQ of 144, but never finished college. And I'm like, how'd you study? She said, well, I never really did, except maybe the night before a test, I'd put on a pot of coffee, stay up all night cramming, and then I'd take the test. That's a classic ADD way of doing things. And I'm like, I think maybe you have adult ADD. And she goes, oh, adults don't have ADD. And I'm thinking, I'm the doctor. But I'm like, well, how about if we look at your brain? And I knew from other work I'd done that I should do it twice at rest and concentration. And when she tried to concentrate, her brain completely deactivated, turned off. Like for you, Willing did it once, but if I had done it twice, probably your brain would be busier at rest. And then when you try to do it, it would drop. And I put the pictures on, a couple of days later, I put the picture on the table in front of her. And as I explained it to her, she started to cry. And she said, you mean it's not my fault? And I said, having ADD is sort of like people who need glasses. And I wear glasses to drive and took my glasses out, put them on. And I said, people who wear glasses aren't dumb, crazy, or stupid. Our eyeballs are shaped funny. And we wear glasses to focus. I said, people have ADD aren't dumb, crazy, or stupid. Some of them are the brightest people I know. But their frontal lobes deactivate. Taking the medicine is like glasses for your frontal lobes. Help you focus. And she did it. She was conflict driven. She was always poking her husband. They got into a huge fight, which is why she tried to kill herself. She stopped that. She's a better mom. She went back and finished college. I mean, her life's... It's like your brain with glasses.
Wow. My friends that take medication for ADD say that to me. They say it's like their life is before and after that moment. So I completely believe what you're saying. second ago, you said this phrase when we were talking about the M, which is your mental health and the impact that has on the development of a brain that's either healthy or unhealthy. And you said this thing about you got to make sure you kill the ants, which is killing those negative thoughts. That's much easier said than done. How does someone go about killing their negative thoughts? Is there a process they can go through to do that?
Yeah, it's a habit, right? And it's not hard. But like any habit, you have to do it repeatedly, like over and over and over and over and over and over. Whenever you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals. Whenever you have a bad thought, a sad thought, a mad thought, your brain releases a certain set of chemicals that make you feel bad immediately. Your hands get cold. They start to sweat. Your muscles get tense. You start to breathe erratically. And it all happens instantaneously. Whenever you have a positive thought, a happy thought, a hopeful thought, a loving thought, like I'm back because I loved the first time I was on the podcast with you, a completely different set of chemicals come out. And your hands get warmer, drier, your breathing slows down, your heart beats in a healthier. It happens like immediately. People have ADD, since we're talking about that, they tend to go more toward negative thoughts because negative thoughts are more stimulating. And here's the exercise. Whenever you feel sad or mad or nervous or out of control, write down what you're thinking. And then ask yourself, is it true? Is it absolutely true? This is a process I learned from my friend Byron Katie. How do I feel when I have this thought? How do I act when I have this thought? And what's the outcome of the thought? So, is it true? Is it absolutely true? How do I feel, act, and the outcome of the thought? How would I feel if I didn't have the thought? How would I act if I didn't have the thought? What's the outcome of not having that thought? And then my favorite part of it is take the original thought. Tana never listens to me. Tana's my wife. I've had that thought. And then turn it to the opposite. Tana does listen to me. And then just ask yourself whether or not that's true. And by directing my thoughts, by managing, so rather than being a victim, so many of my patients are victims of their thoughts until they do the work, right? This is one of the things where do what the FI say. Write down 100 of your worst thoughts. Take them through that process. And by the time you get to 30, they'll stop bothering you.
So if I'm a repetitive negative thinker or a repetitive positive thinker, does that alone change the shape of my brain?
Yes. And in my new book, Change Your Brain Every Day, there's actually pictures of Noelle Nelson. She was writing a book called The Power of Appreciation. And I had her, she wanted me to scan her while she was appreciating her brain. And it looked beautiful. And I'm like, as I'm showing it to her, I'm like, you need to come back tomorrow and I want you to hate yourself. And she goes, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm like, come on, you have to suffer for science. And I said, why don't we have a positive scan? And then we had a negative scan. And the negativity dropped her left temporal lobe, her left frontal lobe, and her cerebellum. So interesting. I mean, similar to what your scan looks like, but hers was way worse. I mean, it's a healthy brain and then a deactivated brain. And that explained to me athletic slumps. It's like, why do people get in athletic slumps? Because negativity turns off their cerebellum and they become just a little less coordinated.
Interesting.
And I'm not a fan of positive thinking. I'm a fan of accurate thinking with a positive spin. So positive thinking is I can have this third piece of cheesecake and it's not going to negatively impact my body or my brain. Like, no. The don't worry, be happy people die the earliest of accidents and preventable illnesses. So a lot of people come to me for anxiety. And I'm like, so on a scale of 0 to 100, how much is it? And they're like, 50. I said, okay, our goal is not 0. Our goal's 15. I want you to have enough anxiety, you do the right things.
Somewhat linked to that is a word you used as well, which is stress. When we're talking about the M in bright minds, how to have healthy brains, what role does stress play on our brains?
Stress, especially chronic unremitting stress. So if we think of the stress you had growing up, where there was a lot of fighting, it raises a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol begins to shrink activity in the hippocampus, one of the major memory and learning centers in the brain. So one could at least argue or postulate your struggle in school was because your emotional brain was busy because you were worried about things at home. It makes it more likely you get infections. It makes it more likely that you have learning problems.
And trauma. Trauma was the other word you used, which I thought it was worth diving into. The impact that trauma has on our brains. And does trauma show up when you scan someone's brain? Can you see it?
Yeah, so trauma shows up as that diamond pattern, which is why I asked you about it. It's your emotional brain. Anterior cingulate at the top, it's the brain's gear shifter. Thalamus, often involved in mood. Basal ganglia, amygdala, involved in anxiety. So we often see worry, anxiety, and sadness, and it shows up as that diamond pattern. That after people do EMDR, a specific psychological treatment for trauma, it calms it down. And I say psychological treatment, I'm like, yeah, but it has biological effects. It's a very interesting treatment. So I get you to, like, first thing, write down 10 big traumas in your life, and we'll go after the worst one first, and have you bring it up. And there's a whole process to it. I'll have your eyes go back and forth while you bring it up, and it's so interesting the connections your brain will make to it. But as you process it, you find you're actually less bothered by it. And it's masterful for single incident traumas like being robbed or being in a car accident. For chronic trauma, it takes longer, but it's so helpful. When I met my wife 18 years ago, her ACE score, adverse childhood experiences, on a scale of 0 to 10, how many bad things happened to you, was an 8. And I was so taken with this woman. And one of my first gifts to her was 10 sessions of EMDR. One, I wanted to see if she would, wrestle with her traumas. She went for 2 years. And I'm absolutely convinced that's one of the reasons she and I rarely fuss with each other, because we don't trigger each other.
And when you talk about trauma, it's not these big T traumas that some people sometimes talk of, which is, when I was young, I was fondled by my uncle, for example. It can also be an isolated incident that happened when you were an adult.
Absolutely. It can be anything that attacks your sense of safety, either physical or emotional. Getting fired is traumatic for a lot of people. Not performing in an important situation can be traumatic.
And that changes the activity within your brain.
Well, it depends on how strong it is.
If it was really strong.
If it's really strong.
Then the activity centers of your brain would...
Well, and there's one thing we haven't talked about yet called brain reserve, which is how healthy was the brain that you brought into trauma. Because you can take 2 soldiers, put them in the same tank, and expose them to the same blast, the same angles, everything's the same. One walks away unharmed, the other one's permanently disabled. Why? It's the brain they brought into the trauma. And so if your mother used drugs while she was pregnant with you, she decreased your reserve. If your mom and dad fought a lot or they separated when she was pregnant with you, that decreased your reserve. If she gave you bad food, if she neglected you, if there was chronic stress, that's decreasing your reserve. So all of us have a certain level of reserve when we go into that trauma. And some people get post-traumatic growth that they're actually better after the trauma. You know, they make the trauma and make something meaningful out of it. And other people have post-traumatic stress where it really causes them to suffer. So I love the idea of brain reserve because I'm like always thinking of boosting mine.
Yeah, because then also when something traumatic happens, I'm in a better place, right? So,
Right. Like if you kill the ants, if your ant population is low.
my automatic negative thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're masterful, if you have an anteater running around in your head, cleaning up the negative thoughts that all of us have, when you go into that trauma, well, you're just better able to deal with it than if you have an undisciplined mind that's infested. And there's nowhere in school that people teach you to kill the ants. We have a foundation called the Change Your Brain Foundation. And I love it so much. We're dedicated to research, education, service. But last year, we produced this new course called Brain Thrive by 5. So it's for preschoolers, kindergarten, grade 1, where we teach kids to love and care for their brain. It's like 30 modules. They're 6 to 7 minutes long. And 6 of them are on learning to kill the ants. And little kids just love that. You don't have to believe every stupid thing you think. And I don't know if you know, but Jerry Seinfeld once said, the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that nobody should ever hear. And just because you have a bad thought doesn't even mean you believe the thought, right? It's not the thoughts you have that make you suffer. It's the thoughts you attach to that make you suffer. I get all sorts of crazy thoughts, and I'm like, my brain is so creative, but I don't believe most of them.
Most unhealthy brain you've ever seen.
For a 15-year-old, it was Kip Kinkle. He's a 15-year-old boy in Springfield, Oregon, who brought weapons to school, got arrested. His parents picked him up from jail. And sometime between 6 o'clock that night and 8 o'clock the next morning, he murdered his mom and dad. And then he went to Springfield, Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon, and shot 25 people. Based on my work, they scanned him for his trial. His brain was so awful. Like, I'd never seen a 15-year-old that had a brain so damaged. And his life reflected it.
What did you see in his brain?
It was shriveled.
At 15?
At 15. And it's like, okay, why? Well, he murdered his mom and dad, so I couldn't get a good history. But he either had anoxia at birth, a lack of oxygen, a severe infection, or something was poisoning his brain. It could have been lead. It could have been an infection. I mean, we were talking about M. The I is immunity and infections. It's a major cause of psychiatric problems. Nobody knows about it.
Have you scanned the brains of lots of psychopaths?
I have.
And what do you see when you look at a psychopath?
So I published a study on murderers, and young murderers have really low frontal lobe function. Older murderers, it's global, low activity. Now, not all murderers are the same. I have one murderer's brain. Her brain actually looked pretty good, but she was in the middle of being abused by her husband, and she murdered him. And it wasn't that irrational, you know, when you really know her story. But most brains are troubled.
Do you think you could look at a brain and predict?
Now, you should ask me should you scan presidential candidates?
Interesting.
Especially now.
What do you think Donald Trump's brain looks like?
Well, I think if we scanned President Biden or former President Trump, neither one of them would be healthy. I mean, one, we talked about the older you get, the less healthy they are. And if someone is going to have nuclear codes, shouldn't we know what their brain looks like? And I wrote an op-ed piece in 2008 when Barack Obama was running against John McCain, arguing for, don't you think we should scan presidential candidates? And yeah, I don't think either one of their brains would be healthy. And that concerns me. Because, I mean, what do we need for our top politicians? Judgment, forethought, impulse control.
Okay, so playing devil's advocate to that, if we started to do that at the very highest office in the land, then that philosophy might creep down to lower offices in the land. And when you go and try and get a job at, I don't know, a restaurant or a marketing agency, it might become the norm that there's a almost brain discrimination or brain prejudice in play where someone like me, they have their brain scanned, they go, listen, he's not going to be very good at focusing on things.
It's an interesting question. I have to tell you, if you date one of my children for more than 4 months, I'm going to get you scanned. I'm going to figure out how to do that. It's the rule in my family. And if you have a bad brain, it doesn't mean you can't come back. But are you smart enough to fix it? That would be the question.
Have you done that?
Well, my son-in-law, Jesse, who I love, his mother has paranoid schizophrenia. I'm like, I want to scan your brain. And I have. He actually wrote a book called Change Your Brain Before 25. And he opens the book with the story of his scan and him sitting with me. He's 6'4". I'm 5'6", and he said he'd never felt so small. And that's the rule in my family. Like I said, when I met my wife, I really liked her. And the first naked part of her I wanted to see was her brain. And so 3 weeks into our relationship, I'm like, hey, you haven't seen the clinic. Don't you want to see the clinic? She came, I scanned her, and it passed.
Do you use her brain against her? I bet you do.
No.
We spoke to Tana, she said you do. You're telling me there's not been one time where you've brought up her brain in a moment of conflict or arguments? Not once, because I will call Tana.
I don't. Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
Because you know what I do? And this is on par with killing the ants. I do an exercise with my patients called the one-page miracle. On one piece of paper, write down what you want. And in a very specific way. What do you want in your relationships? Your work, your money, your physical, emotional, and spiritual health. What do you want? And with her, because she's on the top of my list, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. I always want that. I don't always feel like that. Rude thoughts come into my head. And if I've slept and I've eaten, I never say them. Why? Because it doesn't get me what I want. Right? And that's not selfish. People go, oh, but, what you want is, what I want is not selfish. It's good. Because hedonism is the enemy of happiness. But happiness is a moral obligation because of how you impact other people. Your brain's so smart, but you have to tell it what you want. And every major business, including mine, we have a one-page strategic plan. We know what we want, and we know what we're going to do this quarter and this year. But people don't do that in their lives.
Then you think they should have like a life plan?
Every person should. What do you want? Is your behavior getting you what you want.
Do you think the brain almost conspires to fit what you want? The brain, once you're clear on what you want, I guess your actions will change a little bit, and then your brain will change shape to fit what you said you wanted.
Yes. And the brain is lazy. The brain does what you allow it to do. And it's habitual. I was talking to one of my patients about this yesterday, because we were working on his one-page miracle. And he's like, I could be more positive. And I go, it's a habit to be negative or to be positive. Which highways are you building in your brain? Positive highways or negative highways? Accurate highways or distorted highways? You build them. And if you watch the news, they'll become more distorted. Because in my book, The End of Mental Illness, I did something. It was very fun for me to do. I imagined if I was an evil ruler and I wanted to create mental illness, what would I do? And watching the news, I think there's 62 evil ruler strategies, and I think that's like 12. Because the news is no longer the news. The news is about eyeballs and selling things, and negativity sells. If I can scare you, that will sell. And so you have to be very careful with what you allow in your brain. And yes, you should be informed, but not over and over and over and over again. People who start the day with the news are 27% less happy in the afternoon.
Well, I listen to lots of true crime and serial killer things, like every day. Are you telling me?
It's so funny. I have this show on Instagram called Scan My Brain. I take influential people and scan them. And I did Meghan Trainor, the musician. I love her music. And she goes, I can't sleep. And every night before bed, she's listening to true crime. And I'm like, stop that.
Do you think it matters? Because I listen to true crime before bed.
I have this exercise that I recommend to all my patients. I've done it for 10 years. What went well when I go to bed? I start at the beginning of the day and just go hour by hour looking for what went right about my day. I think that sets your dreams up to be more positive. I do both, and then I just see which one works better for you. Every day, win or learn.
What is the I in Bright Minds?
Immunity and infections. So, do you know your vitamin D level?
No, but I do take the only supplement that I take frequently, I'd say there's two, is vitamin D and omega-3. But because I'm black as well, you
need more vitamin D.
Yeah.
So people have darker skin and going from Africa, where there's a lot of sun, to the UK, where there's no sun, dramatically increase the risk of mental health problems.
Yeah.
Because of vitamin D deficiencies.
Do you know what? I think there's a certain member of my family who I won't name who went from Africa. They've got two Nigerian parents, went from Africa to the UK, and I saw their mental health deteriorate quite significantly to the point that we believe this person might have bipolar now. And I part of me suspects, once I learned about vitamin D deficiency in people that have darker skin, this person has very, 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 very black skin, that it might be associated with that change. Being in a new country that has no sunlight for 30 years when you're, black.
You bet.
Yeah.
And it's part of, so if you see mental health as brain health, then that becomes a critical intervention. If you're not paying attention to brain health, then you're like, well, what antipsychotic or what mood stabilizer can I give them? And I very well may use an antipsychotic or a mood stabilizer, but if I get your brain healthy, you might not need it, or you'll need half the dose. So, and then infections, we're just coming out of a pandemic, and COVID changes your brain in a bad way. It causes, inflammatory bomb to go off in your brain. I was on the Kardashian show last year because I scanned Kindle. Kindle came to see me. And obviously I was on the show, so it was public knowledge. And it was post-COVID, and her emotional brain just was on fire. And that's what we saw with COVID. And long COVID, emotional brain is hot, but then the cortex begins to get low in activity. It's a bad combination.
Why? What does that mean?
It's like chronic damage.
And what does that mean in terms of behavior? What's the implications for behavior?
So the hot limbic brain, tense anxiety that you hadn't had. If you start damaging your cortex and all of a sudden you're sad, you're impulsive, you're irritable, you can get dark thoughts, sometimes even suicidal thoughts. And people who got COVID significantly increase in dementia.
Someone who's listening to this right now that is depressed, clinically depressed, or just feels, depressive symptoms, where do you start? Let's go to the extreme end. Someone that can't get themselves out of bed. I sat here with Jada Pinkett, and she told me that she was clinically depressed, and if she just got to 4 p.m. every day, to her that was a victory. There are lots of people out there that are in that situation right now. Where do you start with those people? What advice do you give them? Because I'm sure you see a lot of them in your practice.
It starts with awareness.
Yeah.
That maybe this is not me, maybe it's my brain. And then it starts with loving your brain and then investigating your brain. Because depression is like chest pain. So if somebody had chest pain, you're like, well, where would you start? Well, you start with an evaluation. You wouldn't start with drugs. I mean, that would be ludicrous. You would go, well, why do you have chest pain? Why are you depressed? How's your thyroid, right? The person that can't get off the couch, they could be hypothyroid. Or one of my friends got depressed. She had anemia. She had pernicious anemia because it was a B12 deficiency. I wouldn't assume, oh, you're depressed, take this medicine. Depression is what it is. It's not why it is. And if you don't know why it is, how do you effectively treat something? So many people come to me and they go, I have an autoimmune disorder. It's like, well, why do you have an autoimmune disorder? Why is your body so mad at you it's attacking itself? And so...
Because my body's broken.
But why is your body broken? Right? And I hate the term broken, right? It's a series like the broken brain. And it's like, no, it's not optimized. Let's optimize it. I never want my patients to think of them as mental, and I never want them to think of themselves as broken. You're awesome. So how can I help you be maybe 10% more awesome?
People feel like their brain is against them, is working against them when they're feeling depression or those chronic cycles of negative thinking. Why is my brain attacking me? Why is it against me?
So part of it is it's not healthy, and part of it's undisciplined. And I got to do a lecture last year for the coaching staff of the Miami Heat. It was so much fun.